By the mid-19th century, the American whaling fleet had surged to over 700 vessels manned by 18,000 men, a force larger than all other nations combined. Maintaining this maritime infrastructure required an annual expenditure of $4 million, but the returns were immense. The fleet brought home a yearly harvest valued at over $7 million, fueling the growth of early coastal industrial centers. This commercial dominance grew from earlier logistical blueprints, specifically the Dutch and English operations that hunted in the Arctic, Greenland, and Spitsbergen seas throughout the 17th and 18th centuries. To sustain crews in those hostile climates, missions required staggering upfront provisions. A typical Dutch fleet would depart with 10,800 barrels of beer, hundreds of thousands of pounds of beef and pork, and over 500,000 pounds of bread and biscuit. These early operations were strictly seasonal. Arctic ice and extreme weather confined the hunt to the short summer months, forcing the ships to remain in coastal waters where they could access land-based support if necessary. This static, land-tethered logistics chain eventually reached its geographical limit. To increase the commercial yield, the industry had to decouple from the coast and push into the open ocean. In 1775, the British ship Amelia performed a pivotal maneuver by rounding Cape Horn. This expedition opened the vast South Sea fishery to year-round commercial exploitation, far from any established ports. Entering the deep ocean meant abandoning the coastal right whale in favor of the pelagic sperm whale, a predator whose unique physiology offered a far more lucrative biological yield. The right whale had long been the primary target for its massive volume of baleen, the flexible filter plates in its mouth, and a large quantity of oil that was often described by whalemen as inferior and foul-smelling. The sperm whale, or cachalot, provided entirely different raw materials. Beyond its toothed lower jaw, the whale's massive head contained a reservoir of spermaceti, a high-value, limpid liquid wax that crystallized into a pure white substance upon exposure to air. Accessing this product was dangerous. Unlike the sluggish right whale, the sperm whale was actively hostile, capable of using the massive recoil of its flukes to splinter approaching wooden boats with a single blow. Pursuing the sperm whale transformed the industry. What was once a seasonal, near-shore harvest became a multi-year pelagic operation, requiring specialized tools and extreme physical risk. The primary tool for this deep-water hunt was the whaleboat, a slender, fragile craft suspended from curved timbers on the ship's side called davits. Davits are the vertically fixed supports used to lower and raise small boats from a larger vessel. These boats relied on human leverage. The boat header stood in the stern, utilizing an immense steering oar to maintain maneuverability while navigating heavy swells. During the pursuit phase, the harpooner was stationed at the foremost oar. He was expected to pull at maximum physical output for hours, providing the power necessary to close the distance between the boat and the whale. At the moment of intercept, the exhausted harpooner had to drop his oar and spin around in the pitching bow and execute a 20 to 30-foot long dart with a heavy iron harpoon. Success was statistically unlikely. Given the violent motion of the sea and the physical depletion of the oarsmen, whalemen estimated that less than 10% of fair chances for a dart resulted in a successful strike. The initial hunt phase relied on pushing human biomechanics to their absolute limit to intersect an apex predator in the open sea. Once a strike was attempted, hunters utilized a two-iron system. Both harpoons were connected to the same running line, allowing the harpooner to dart the second iron immediately after the first to double the chance of a secure hold. This schematic details the line tub's safety rigging. The lower end of the rope terminates in an eye splice hanging unattached to the boat. If a diving whale runs out the line, the rope must fly free, preventing the boat from being dragged into the deep. Upon a successful strike, the boat header gave the order "stern all." The crew immediately backed the boat away from the strike zone to avoid the violent instinctive thrashing of the whale's flukes. To tire a fleeing or gallied whale, whalemen deployed drugs. Drugs are heavy wooden crossblocks attached to the line that create massive aquatic resistance, fettering the whale's kinetic energy as it tries to escape. Against a fast-moving whale, the hunter utilized pitch poling. This technique involved balancing a 10-foot lance upright in the palm and darting it across the water from a violently jerking boat. The hunter hauled the boat against the whale's flank to deliver the final blow. He sank the long lance deep into the torso, churning the blade to locate and sever the animal's innermost life centers. Killing the Leviathan was a calculated engineering problem of managing massive, erratic kinetic energy through a sequence of ropes, friction, and precise ballistics. Once the whale was killed, it was towed back to the ship and secured alongside the hull with heavy fluke chains. This artificial support was necessary because without it, the massive carcass would sink to the bottom. The crew began by decapitating the whale. They hoisted the massive head to the ship's waist, keeping it partially submerged to protect the spermaceti and prevent the vessel from capsizing. This diagram shows the rigging for cutting in. Blocks lashed to the main mast, connected to the windlass, dropping a blubber hook to the carcass. Heaving the windlass caused the ship to careen, rolling the whale to spiral strip its blubber into long blanket pieces. The whaling vessel operated as a floating lever, using its own masts and rigging to dismantle a biological mass equal to itself. The blanket pieces were lowered into the blubber room, where shoeless spadmen chopped the fat into portable oblongs known as horse pieces. These pieces were fed into the tryworks, deck-mounted brick furnaces where the minced blubber was boiled down into liquid oil. This process was fueled by the whale itself. Once the initial fire was lit, the crew used drained, crisp scraps of boiled blubber to fuel the furnace for the voyage. The rendered oil was cooled, transferred to wooden barrels, and stored hermetically in the ship's hold, where it would remain stable for years. To conclude the process, the crew scrubbed the blood-soaked decks with a potent lye derived directly from the whale's own ashes, chemically erasing the evidence of the processing. The whaling ship was an entirely self-sustaining factory, utilizing every physical and chemical property of its prey to fuel its own operations. While the oil in the hold was the primary economic driver, the decapitation phase allowed the crew to harvest highly specialized secondary materials. The crew extracted 42 ivory teeth from the sperm whale's lower jaw. These were carved into scrimshaw, detailed illustrations etched into the bone, which were then sold as high-end maritime curiosities. From the right whale, they harvested baleen. This material was shipped to terrestrial factories, where its flexible strength was utilized for rigid consumer goods like umbrella stocks and structured apparel. The crew also utilized the whale for sustenance. They mixed the brain lobes with flour, cut steaks from the tail, and made meatballs from porpoises caught during the voyage. The rarest yield was ambergris, a highly valuable waxy byproduct of whale dyspepsia found in the intestines. This foul-smelling substance was processed for use in luxury perfumes to preserve the fragrance. Nothing was wasted. The biological entity was atomized into distinct global commodities, ranging from structural apparel to high-end luxury goods. The true engine of this industry was the unmanufactured sperm oil and spermaceti sealed in the hold. These fluids possessed a singular purity, burning with a bright, smokeless flame. Prior to the rise of petroleum, this oil was the foundational source of illumination for the global market, fueling the tapers, lamps, and candles that lit the 19th century world. By extending the day, this harvested light drove economic expansion, allowing for nocturnal industry and increased urban productivity. The steady flame illuminating a quiet parlor began its life as a mass of blood and oil, extracted through years of extreme maritime toil. Once the barrels were sealed and the decks were bleached, the ship returned to the state of a spotless, silent merchant vessel. The crew would have a brief moment of clean respite. This quiet was only ever temporary. The cycle was immediately reset by the next cry of "There she blows" from the masthead, starting the slaughter anew. The 19th century pelagic whaling industry was a flawless, ruthless algorithm of extraction. It weaponized human endurance to convert the ocean's apex predators into the foundational fuel of modern civilization.